So back to school is this week. Um, Parents are gonna have to start waking up again and making sure they're ready to go early in the morning. Um, just at least for me, is a con. It's a harder thing for me to do. But one of the pros of having kids, especially a teenager, is that I get to stay up to date with the latest lingo, with the slang of today. Um, it apparently has a name for it. It's called a lot of it is called brain rot, I guess. Don't know why. Um, but here's an example of a couple of words. I could probably make a dictionary, I found out, um, but here's just a few. There's a sigma. Uh, Sigma is a cool, independent, lone type, lone wolf type. So it's, by yourself. Think of, oh my God, I forgot his name. The guy from Gran Turismo. Oh my God. Clint Eastwood. Think Clint Eastwood. He's the epitome of Sigma. Um, and then there's cooked. Cooked means being ruined, doomed, in a sticky situation, as I would say. They would be like, oh, I'm cooked, if they're about to get in trouble or something, or they got in trouble. And then there's one I learned the other day that I kept hearing my 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 oldest say. She kept saying the word chud, chud, chud. Now, I found out, I asked her what it was, and she says it's someone, a homebody, someone who stays at home, is just lazy, doesn't want to do anything. A chud, that's what you do on Saturday mornings. But I, I, I wanted to verify this because I was going to use it in my sermon today, so I Googled it, and it turns out there's a whole history behind it, including that there's a 1980s horror film by the name Chud. It's about these monsters who live underground in New York, which kind of actually grasps the meaning of it, because people use it for different reasons. And if they tell you that it means, or it stands for charismatic, handsome, unique dude, they're lying. It doesn't stand for that. It actually means like loser, like a bum. That's what we would sometimes say. It's a loser. That's what a chud is. It's fun learning these words and staying up to date with them. It helps me kind of see where they're at, how they view life. Um, and I would invite you to ask, young kids, teens, young adults how they view life. It's fun to really get to know them and give them space to see how they view the world. There's ask for their hopes, what they dream, what they hope for. But it's also important to ask what they fear, what anxieties they hold of the future. I read this week about two different ways. They're not the only ways, young people, don't be mad at me. They're not the only ways. But there's two different ways that the younger generation has been dealing with what what's called despair, this sense of hopelessness about the future, this fear, this anxiety about what awaits them. Um, One way is the way of withdrawing. Apparently, in the 1990s, there was this phenomenon in Japan called I'll mess it up, hikimori. It means something like pulling away from. Um, it was a trend that's picked up outside of Japan, even after all these years. There was a British magazine that recently profiled a young man living this out in the UK. So apparently, this young man was in his 20s, and after graduating from high school, he took this almost like a vow of staying at home. And it's this phenomenon about staying at home, sometimes for months, sometimes for years, just staying away from the world. And this young man, when asked why, he said that the real world had just become too much to handle. Online and in his room alone, isolated, there he found safety. Safety from disappointment, safety from suffering and pain. On the opposite end of that, there's another piece that was pointing to how the generation is having to deal with what we call now influencers. Um, they're not like famous people. They're a complete different kind of breed. Apparently, they make these videos, these influencers, and they do it for different things, advertisement, different stuff. Or a lot of influencers just try to, they give this image of being perfect at a specific niche. So it could be working out, it could be uh, having a perfect vacation, how to do these perfect spiritual habits. It's this image of perfecting a specific niche. But when you really start to think about it, um, it's just a presentation of a life that gives you the impression that you can have your life together and perfect. And if you do, if you can at least get one thing perfect, maybe that will help you avoid bad things in life. So one withdraws from hardship, and the other one attempts to perform past it, to pretend nothing is wrong. And they may look like opposites, but they're both a reaction of a culture that just doesn't know how to deal with suffering and pain, with difficulty. And the truth is, life is hard. It's difficult. Yeah. No one is immune to grief, to the feeling of loss, to feeling like a failure, to having a strained relationship. Whatever it is, those things are unavoidable. And becoming a Christian, it doesn't change that. Having more faith in God doesn't make all the chaos go away in our lives. What Christian faith does do is it gives us a realistic view of it. It makes us stay grounded. It gives us a hope to hold on to in the midst of the chaos. We can't withdraw our way out of suffering. We can't perform our way out of it either. But that doesn't mean that despair is our only option either. It's actually sometimes in our lowest moments, in the suffering, that we see God clearly, that we hear God who doesn't abandon us. And we see this truth first in our first reading from 1 Kings. Elijah is at his lowest point of his ministry. Now, Elijah is a prophet of God, and he's in the northern kingdom. It's when Israel was divided into two. And there's a queen by the name of Queen Jezebel, who is a Phoenician, who comes with her god, the god of Bel. And they establish this new worship of this new god. And so Elijah comes to the northern kingdom, and he challenges these prophets of Bel. He challenges them to a contest to call upon God to see whose sacrifice will be accepted by the God, which God will actually answer the prayer. And so they go and they have an audience, and Elijah, the prophets of Bel, call upon their god Bel to come and accept the sacrifice, and nothing happens. And Elijah mocks them, and then to mock them even further, he puts water on his sacrifice that he prepares, just so that it's clear that it's going to be God who comes and accepts the offering. And so Elijah calls upon the God of Israel, and fire comes down from the sky, and it takes up Elijah's sacrifice that he had prepared. And after seeing this, the crowd, the nation there, they see this and they fall down on their knees and they worship the God of Israel. And this is everything that Elijah had hoped for. God had answered. God had proved that he was there. God had proved that he was on his side. And the people had gone back to worship the God of Israel. But his victory only lasted for a little while. That was until Queen Jezebel, humiliated, intends to kill him and sends word to Elijah. And Elijah gets overcome with fear, and he runs away and he goes into the wilderness. And he just lays out there after he's just had it, and he says, I've had enough, Lord, take my life. And just like that, he went from having the greatest victory in ministry to being at the lowest points of his ministry. But just as God had showed up for him during the contest, God showed up to him too in his despair. He didn't leave Elijah alone. He sent an angel to minister to Elijah, to feed him, to renew him, to restore him. And then Elijah gets up and he travels to Mount Horeb, where our reading picked up this morning. And he has this encounter with God there. It says that a great wind came, and then an earthquake and a fire. And we're told that God was not in any of them. And then where we do find God is in what the text describes as a low whisper, or in some translations, a sound of sheer silence, it says. That's where Elijah encounters God. And there in the silence, Elijah is able to unburden himself. He's able to tell God of how he feels, alone, how he feels afraid. And there God comforts him and directs him and gives him a new calling. He anoints he tells him to go anoint his successor to pass the torch to. And Elijah found God, not in this grand performative display of power, but in this ordinary silence. It's a good reminder for us that God can be at work, is at work, even when nothing dramatic happens, even when nothing seems to be changing in our lives, even when things might feel like they're getting worse, or we feel nothing at all. God is present even in those moments, not just the powerful ones. He's there in the ordinary ones, in the quiet, in the waiting, in the silence, when we don't feel God's presence. Paul in our other readings says we don't have to climb to heaven to find God. We don't have to go to the deepest parts of the earth to find God. God finds us. God comes near to us. And we're giving words outside ourselves to hold on to. We don't have to dig down deep to find the perfect words, perfect faith. We're given the faith to hold on to. That Jesus is Lord and that he rose from the dead. Those are words we can hold on to and find hope in. In our gospel reading, the disciples, they're terrified. They're in the sea and the waves, and there's this great wind. And then they see Jesus walking on the storm. And Jesus there isn't just performing a miracle to perform a miracle. He's also revealing something. He's revealing who he is. All throughout Scripture, sea, it represents this chaos that threatens human life. And it's God alone who has power over it. We see this in the Psalms. We see this in Job. So when we see Jesus walking on the water across the waves, and him saying, "It is I, do not be afraid," he's showing his disciples, he's telling us about his own identity. There we see who he is. That he is the God who can come into the chaos, who can calm the storm. And Peter, wanting to know if this is really true, calls out to him and says, "Lord, if it's you, command me to come to you on the water." And Jesus says, "Come." And Peter steps out and goes towards Jesus. And then it says that a wind and waves come around him, and fear overtakes him, and he starts to sink. Now, if you've ever drowned before, which I did, I was like 6 or 7, and my uncle had told me don't go into the deep end, but I wanted to follow the older kids, and I went anyways, and I started drowning, and it's all a blur to me, really. The only thing I remember is my uncle pulling me up and setting me down, and then he was just laughing. We just ended up laughing together instead of me getting in trouble. I don't think he told my mom then, but she would have been horrified and would have never let me go swimming again. But Peter is in this situation where he just feels helpless. When you're drowning, you feel helpless. There's nothing really you can do other than to try to stay calm. But if you're just deeply, deeply in already, there's this sense of helplessness. And it's then when Peter says, Lord, save me. And he realizes that he can't do anything about his situation. And that's really the point of this. It's not about Peter finding more faith and not doubting and never sinking. It's about how Jesus rescued Peter even in the midst of his fear and doubt. The point is that Peter saw the reality of his situation. He saw exactly how helpless he was, and he cried out to Jesus. And Jesus immediately reached out his hand, caught him, and brought him up. Just like with Elijah, Jesus came to Peter in his hour of need, in the moment he cried out to him. It's easy to start believing that God is only with us when our faith feels strong, when we're reading our Bibles and praying every day, when we're growing the way we think we should, or that he's only near to us in those great mountaintop experiences we get in retreats or on a powerful Sunday. And to be clear, God is with us in those moments too. But that doesn't mean that those are the only times he is with us. God is with us even when we feel like we have no faith left in us, when we have doubt, when the weight of our past mistakes come back to accuse us, when we don't feel like the Christians we think we should be, when we feel like sinners who deserve to be punished. God is with us in those times where we feel helpless, when we feel like we're drowning in the chaos of life, with depression, grief, loneliness, isolation. He's there with us when we feel like failures. He's there with us when we're sitting in hospital rooms, when we're receiving bad news, when we're watching a loved one slip away, when it feels like we're losing more than gaining. God is in all that too. And God comes near to us and doesn't abandon us in our hour of need. Now, that doesn't mean that it will always look like a miraculous healing or a better diagnosis or getting past our hardship. Sometimes things get worse and the suffering grows more unbearable and it feels like we're sinking deeper and deeper. But even then, it doesn't mean that God is not working in our lives and that God isn't with us or that we've been abandoned by God. Whatever darkness we face, we've never faced it alone. We face it with a God who knows suffering and death, and with a God who rose from the dead, a God who will not let go of us, who will reach out to us when we're drowning, when we're helpless, and save us. And that's what we can rest in, even when it feels like we're losing everything here and now. We can always proclaim with our lips, confess with our lips what we will in a little bit with the Nicene Creed. To hope that we look for in the resurrection of the dead and the life of the world to come. We don't have to withdraw from the world and disappear. We don't have to perform either pretending we have it all together, hoping no one notices we're barely staying afloat. Instead, like Elijah and Peter, we can face reality as it is. We can admit that we cannot avoid suffering and pain and death. And in that moment, let go of our control and cry out simply to God, Lord, save us, save me. In moments like that, faith doesn't look like strength or certainty. It just looks like trusting in the God who doesn't let you go, who is there with you, who has entered our suffering, who has faced death itself, and has risen again. And because he lives, we can find in Jesus a hope beyond our suffering, pain, and death. In him we have a God who has come near us, who will never let us go, who will not let us drown, and who will lift us up and rescue us. Amen.